All right, I'm here with Michael Brandt. He is the CEO and co-founder of H.V.M.N. It's health via modern nutrition. Michael, welcome to the show, brother.
Joel, thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening in. It's going to be a great one.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This is our second time recording. We're going to make it happen. Little technical issues, no big deal. That's part of life. So we were talking, and I'm curious, could you just talk to everybody and like your background, maybe, and how you got here? I mean, were you always thinking like, yes, this one day I'm going to be, on a mission to get ketones into people's bodies?
I've been working on ketones for the better part of the last decade, but it'd be a lie to say that when I was 8 years old, I was fixated on ketones the way that some people are fixated on being an astronaut. I will say though, that there's a line that connects it all through, which is I've always been an engineer, and in undergrad, I studied computer science and product design at Stanford and got really into systems thinking and user experience around cutting edge new technologies. And that translation from something really technical, maybe too technical, but like very cool, to, okay, how does that cross the chasm to being mainstream and approachable and accessible by everyone? And when I graduated, my co-founder and I, we started getting into biohacking and trying everything out. So I was really early on continuous glucose monitors. I ordered continuous glucose monitors. Back then there was no Levels or NutriSense. So we'd order it off of European eBay, and it would take 3 weeks to come in the mail because it wasn't, you couldn't just buy it in the United States. Yeah. It wasn't like legal, or you had to go through like a really long doctor process. And a lot of other stuff, Russian nootropics, a bunch of different things we tried out to optimize our outputs, to both at the office to get good cognitive output. It was kind of interesting because at the time we were entrepreneurs, we had a few different projects going, and we started dabbling around with nootropics in order to get higher output on all the other projects that we were doing. And then the light bulb kind of went off, and we're like, why don't we make this the main thing? And my co-founder and I, we actually launched a company called NutroBox back, this is like 2014, and that did really well. We actually got onto Shark Tank, and we got a ton of interest around that. That went really well. That was our first brand. And then on the heels of that, we just got deeper and deeper into biohacking. I became a semi-pro marathoner. I run 6-minute miles for the marathon. I track everything. I'll track my heart rate. I do a lot of things, like I'll go on a run where I run as fast as possible without letting my heart rate go above 140 BPM. And I'll do it in a fasted state. Like I dial in the different gears. And so I've been able to get fast at marathoning quickly because I have this engineering approach to it. And we built this whole community around it. And as I've gotten into distance running and intermittent fasting and all these aspects of biohacking and performance, the one thing that kept coming up was ketones and like elevating your ketone levels. If you're doing distance running, you want to develop metabolic flexibility. You want your body to be really good at making and burning ketones. If you're doing these fasts, if you're doing extended intermittent fasting, you want to be getting your body to burn down its glucose stores and get into ketosis. And the one byline, like the one thread line that connected through all of these experiences was ketones. And we asked the first principles question on it, which is, okay, well, ketones are really cool. People are doing all this stuff, keto diet, bulletproof coffee, fasting, long runs, doing all these things to elevate your ketone levels. Okay. First principles question on it is, why can't you go to the store and buy a ketone? I can buy collagen. I can buy omega-3. I can buy whey protein. I can buy CBD at the store. Why can't I go and buy a protein, but why can't I go and buy a ketone? And like pulling at that thread is what led us to where we are today. We're in 2017. We launched the world's first ketone ester drink, and then unlocked a $6 million contract with the DoD Special Operations Command. And then earlier this year, we launched version 2, the more consumer ready version, where we brought down the price by 2/3, made it taste way better, made it work better. And the vision is coming true. Like we're in Sprouts and grocery stores in general. And it's like the way Vital Proteins brought collagen into the nutritional collagen into the fold. We're doing the same with ketones.
Yeah, really cool stuff. And then could you just kind of touch on the whole first responder thing? We were talking about like just the military and the first responder and how you guys have had that contract with DoD. And I'm just curious, like what you guys have seen in terms of like cognitive performance or even physical performance. I mean, these guys are, especially with first responder community, and even military, they're working these crazy hours, night shift, and having to wake up at early in the morning, 3 in the morning to do these operations. So I'm just curious of what maybe you've seen anecdotally or just even some of their feedback in terms of like cognitive or just physical performance with ketones.
Yeah, a big thrust of the work that we do with the DoD, it's extensive. It's multi-million-dollar contract, and there's 7+ different subtasks. But the long and the short of it is that we do a lot of work in hypoxia, which is low oxygen, where that stimulates mountaintop fighting, altitude training, being in a fighter jet at altitude, at deep sea diving. There's a lot of instances where DoD personnel are in a low oxygen environment. And it also, to an extent, carries over to just generally strenuous environments where, like when you're working out really hard, you're out of breath, you can also be hypoxic. You can be low oxygen. So a big thrust of the work that we do with the DoD is looking at hypoxia. And the long and the short of it is that we're seeing ketones, especially in the brain, rescue cognitive ability. So there's this decrease, right? If you're at 20,000 feet of altitude, that's the altitude level that we simulate. 20,000 feet of altitude, and you're rucking at incline, like wearing 45 pounds of weight and marching up a incline for half an hour, 45 minutes, you're going to induce some fatigue. And then when you do a shooting drill afterwards, you're going to expect to see some decrement in performance. Like you're not going to be shooting as accurately as you were before the ruck.
Yeah.
Ketones, however, are recovering a significant amount of that cognitive ability. So on these attention and focus and cognitive response types of tasks, ketones are showing significant increase or like a less of a decrease in performance than what you'd expect given the tiredness, the strain that someone would feel given that context. So super interesting. Yeah, super interesting. And I think that extends to a lot of these different areas. And that's where we're talking about first responders and a lot of other interesting, like demanding, strenuous types of occupations.
Yeah. I'm curious too for like in terms of hypoxia and, this was just last week I was sick. And so I was thinking, man, I wonder what you guys, if there's any research done with ketones and immunity, but even with the whole C virus, we know like that the C virus, there is that hypoxic effect. Have you guys seen anything? Has there anything been done that you're able to talk about in terms of that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. One of the findings with our SOCOM work is that, okay, so when you're at normal sea level, your blood oxygenation is at 100%. When you go to altitude, it drops to below 70%, like 60, 65%, if you're at like 20,000 feet of altitude. When you take ketones, your blood oxygenation goes back up to like the mid 70s. So you get this like 10% increase. It's more like, 10% on 65% is more than just a 10% increase, but you're basically getting a 10% plus increase in blood oxygenation. Wow. We haven't done anything specifically looking at COVID. I think that's really interesting. We've heard a lot of anecdotal stuff, but yeah, the big way that when people are measuring the seriousness of someone in COVID is they have that finger.
Yeah, they have
clamp
the
that's
SPI,
measuring
the SPO2.
Yeah, SPO2. Yeah. That's the exact same biomarker that we look at, where in hypoxia, ketones are increasing SPO2. So yeah, I think the C word is so controversial, and it's like I'd want there to be rigorous science behind it, but I can say, yeah, we're pointing at some of the same things. And it's always fun to like jump in and talk about the mechanisms of action. I think to zoom out for a sec, it's also helpful to look at like what is a ketone and what their natural evolutionary role is. Because in a sense, it's like this hyper modern thing that we invented, and this is like next nutritional primitive. But on the other hand, it's like the oldest thing that's existed, where the human body's always been making ketones for 300,000 years. ancient humans had higher ketone levels, in fact, because there was no Milky Way bar on the
There was
savannah.
there was no abundance of food everywhere every time you turn around. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your body naturally makes ketones when you're not eating super high sugar, super high carb. And when you're moving around, ancient humans, there's a strong hypothesis that ancient humans moved around 4, 5, 6 miles a day, maybe even doing endurance hunting. If anyone's read Born to Run, like an interesting aspect of humans is humans are the absolute best endurance animal. A human can go further than a horse over a 24-hour period. Humans can go further than a horse. Humans are just really good at going like long distances, like semi-fast. Yeah. Not as fast as a horse in like, an all out sprint, but over 24 plus hours, like there's a really strong hypothesis that we're doing a lot of endurance hunting, and the C virus, it's so loaded that it's hard. I'm not going to make any strong claims around it, but I will say that like we're pointing at the same thing, and it's really interesting. And I think a lot of doctors and medical professionals are looking at different areas. It's funny. My parents both got COVID at the same time. Knock on wood, they're doing all right. And like they're two doctors, and like my parents are not conspiracy people, whatever. Like they're very like middle of the road, like care about COVID, whatever. Their two doctors are just giving them totally different advice. And it's like, they live in Chicago, and it's like one of the doctors at Northwestern and the others at like University of Chicago. And these are not like tinfoil hat, like crazy people. Like they're just like normal doctors, and like they had two totally different approaches. Wow. Like one is like, yo, you're going hard antiviral, and then you can travel like 5 days later. Other doctors like, you can't do this. Like, we're not going to give you the antiviral, but you can't travel for 2 weeks. And like, wow. What I will say is I think ketones are an interesting tool. So like informed medical professionals that are developing standard of care for their patients, I think it's something that people are looking at. I know anecdotally, ketones cross the blood-brain barrier. That's why they have this effect. That's why they exist in the first place, is that fat does not cross the blood-brain barrier. Glucose does, but glucose, you can only store so much of it, and glucose has its own issues. You don't want to be eating sugar all the time. The whole reason that we evolved the ability to be able to make and utilize ketones is they cross the blood-brain barrier. So what I've heard a lot of in the community is people who have long COVID or had that brain fog for 2, 3, 4+ weeks afterwards, that's where ketones have been really helpful. Like I'm not even going to come close to saying that ketones, I don't think like solve COVID whatsoever, but I think that some of the symptoms we've seen anecdotally, people are able to use ketones as part of feeling better from it, where that brain fog in particular is an area where people have had good success.
Oh yeah. And that's huge. I mean, that's what I would be thinking. I mean, like, hey, if that's a tool I could recommend to clients and other people, like, hey, to mitigate some of these effects, it might be a worthy, I mean, I can't see why it seems to me pretty like it would be a pretty good hack or something, at least to add in the routine and the recovery process, especially if you were feeling really, really bad. And I'm wondering too, if you could just kind of talk about your guys' brand and kind of what makes you different, right? I mean, there's so many ketones out there. There's ketone salt, esters. You have the bulletproof coffee. You use you put the MCT oil on there. I mean, someone might say, well, why don't I just put bulletproof MCT in there, Michael? Like, what is exactly is different about kind of what you guys are doing unique?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Bulletproof is awesome. I think bulletproof was the coolest biohack that everyone tried of the last decade, right? Anyone who like said that they were into biohacking or anywhere in and around biohacking in the last decade tried bulletproof. And I think a lot of people had a lot of success with it. Swapping out your Frappuccino sugar bomb with 46 grams of sugar, like not the breakfast of champions. Yeah. But having something zero sugar or very low sugar that has healthy fats that your body can turn into ketones, that's awesome. The big difference, I mean, we sell MCTs also, and there's different kinds of MCTs, and you can have higher grade of MCT. We sell a very high grade of MCT. Even so, an MCT, it's a precursor to ketones, and it only converts somewhat. Like even the best MCT, it'll convert like 10% into ketones, which is better than nothing, but it's not going to give you that same jolt. It's not going to give you that same rise where our ketone IQ, it hits as quick as a cup of coffee. When in like 10, 15 minutes, you have elevated ketone levels. You can be at,
I'm holding the bottle up for anybody that wants to see. I got my own little
Yeah,
Right.
for the listeners, like we sell it in a bottle that has 10 servings in it. It's $40. And if you have one serving or a couple of servings, you get into elevated ketones almost immediately. Whereas MCT, it's like, again, I think that was the state of the art for the last decade, which is like, don't eat sugar, eat MCT, and it will make your body make ketones eventually to a degree. Versus now it's like, and it's not an either or. You can also still have bulletproof coffee, but
Yeah.
also have a shot of ketones alongside, and you'll get what you're after just more directly. It's like, instead of having this like precursor that like sort of kind of converts into ketones, you can have just a direct ketone. So that's where it situates with MCTs. There's a few other types of ketones out there, right? There's like ketone salts. The thing with ketone salts are interesting. They're very affordable. They're very cheap. The good, bad, and ugly of them is they're very cheap to make. And what you literally have is a ketone molecule that's bounded to a salt molecule. So like a sodium or potassium, magnesium. And that limits things. That limits the amount that you can have. It limits the digestion rate. And you can't have too much of it, because if you have too much of it, then you end up with an upset stomach. So you can't have like a large amount of ketones that way, because then you're having a large amount of salt. So what all the smart ketone salts companies try to do is they try to like give you like a little bit of potassium ketones and a little bit of sodium ketones. They try to like spread it out so you're not like jamming too much of one. But at the end of the day, it's just a massive mineral load. You can get like a little bit of ketone elevation, but not like amazing ketone elevation. Versus what we have is just straight ketones, and it costs a little bit more than salts, but it works a lot better. And our whole mission, our whole brand is around making the best ketone delivery product. So around like covering, pharmacokinetics, like how well it elevates your ketones and how long it keeps you with elevated ketones, to how it tastes, to GI issues, just like an overall holistic product experience. That's our whole business. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been taking it for the last week. I've had no GI distress or anything like that. I mean, I took the recommended dosage, which I think is like 30 milliliters, and I'll just sip on it in the morning and stuff. And yeah, with my coffee, and I didn't notice anything. I had no discomfort or any issues. So that was great. Like you said, I've done the MCTs from back in the day and had disaster pants, so I know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. I'm curious, and I wanted to ask you because, Dr. Gundry just came out with this great new book, The Keto Code. And in the book, he talks about that we've always been, even Dave Asprey, I remember saying like ketones are like this high grade gasoline that makes your bodies, run smooth and efficiently. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I've just kind of always understood it that way. But he was saying that, it's not that they're not really that. He said, what they are is they're playing this role as a messenger, and that they're telling the mitochondria to uncouple and literally waste fuel. Not that this is actually like a really good thing though, still, but I'm just curious, like having like some of this new information coming out, has that just changed the way you guys think about ketones, or and maybe even the way that you integrate it with the lifestyle of the customers?
There's some interesting schools of thought on that, where
by the way, Dr. Gundry could be completely wrong. I mean, and I think that's the amazing debate with science, right? Is that we get to hear like guys like Dr. Veach and other people like Gundry, and hey, like talk about it, like let's have a conversation. So
yeah, that it's possible. So there's that elevation of ketones, and you see that elevation of mitochondria uncoupling. The uncoupling in that context might be helpful, because you're also upregulating different antioxidants like glutathione and melatonin, which Dr. Gundry talked about as well.
Yeah,
that it's like when you look at something like inflammation in and of its own isn't good or bad, right? Like if you get an injury, if you get like punched in the arm, it's going to get inflamed, and that inflammation is good. It's healing the site of impact. So like, but in other contexts,
you actually want some inflammation. You're right.
Right. Because there's this rush of blood and nutrients to repair the damage there. And this actually goes down another interesting path of like cold therapy versus heat therapy for recovery, which is really interesting because we could go into that a little bit too, where basically it's all the rage now, like ice baths, right? Like, okay, you do a hard workout and then you do ice baths. My take is that, okay, the ice baths clearly counteract inflammation, and that's why people like it. I actually think it's bad. I think you want to go into a sauna, because the sauna basically multiplies on top of the inflammation. Like if I go on like 18-mile run and I don't know, like go really hard, I'm going to be sore all over. I'm going to be inflamed. And that inflammation is delivering nutrients and blood and oxygen and all that good recovery benefit to my muscles. The only context where I would want to go into an ice bath is if I'm going to literally need to run tomorrow. Like if you're a pro athlete and you got to go do it again tomorrow, I can see you would want to reduce the inflammation so you can get up and do it again tomorrow. However, for improvement, for if your goal is athletic improvement, muscle gain, endurance gain, you're clipping actually a lot of the benefit. Like you actually want to go the opposite direction. Like you want to go into the sauna, because the sauna is also going to engorge your blood vessels and it's going to cause even more delivery of nutrition and oxygen to your blood vessels. And you're going to basically like double down on that inflammation. But then like a week later, like once the recovery of that hard workout is complete, it takes days to recover, like that, you will be in a much better spot than if you'd done the cold pack and made it. You basically, like, the inflammation it like hurts and it temporarily impairs your ability to perform the next like day or two. But if you let the inflammation happen and you encourage it, then you actually come out stronger. So, I mean, this applies to everything that people do. Like when people have like Tylenol or ibuprofen, it's the same thing. It's like, well, yeah, if you're in like a 3-day long soccer tournament and you're playing today and tomorrow, the next day, I could see, okay, yeah, you need to be not sore tomorrow. But generally, like you're working against your body. Like your body has this natural response where you exercise really hard and your body's trying to repair, and that inflammation, that swelling is net actually good. So I don't know, it's a counter take to everyone going to their like ice plunges and everything. I think sauna is the way to go for recovery, and I would use ice and ibuprofen very selectively. Like you're basically going to mine it. You're going to like get plus a couple of points of performance if you need to perform again in the next couple of days, but you're going to get minus points on your like net overall recovery gain.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about talk about this amazing product, the Ketone IQ, and how should one use this? I mean, I was using it, like using through fasting and just kind of, sipping on it with my coffee. And so, yeah, how should people use it?
Yeah, it sounds like you're using it pretty much right. The ketone's best friend is coffee. Coffee goes really well with ketone. It's interesting, right? What does caffeine do in your brain? Caffeine is acaloric, right? There's no calories inside of coffee, and yet it makes you feel really energized. Caffeine is actually inducing a higher level of energy expenditure while not giving you any energy. It's blocking adenosine, the sleep hormone. So you feel not sleepy, you feel highly alert, highly stimulated. But again, it's acaloric. So what you're doing is you're creating an energy deficit. And what's really interesting is that how ketones fit into that, like a puzzle piece, where ketones have all these benefits. They cross the blood-brain barrier. They subjectively feel really nice when your brain is running off of ketones. They convert into ATP in your cells using less oxygen. They have less oxidative stress buildup. So ketones are advantageous over glucose for a number of different reasons. So if you're having caffeine and you're creating this energy demand in your neurons and your body in general, supplying that energy demand with ketones, like, I mean, subjectively, it feels really nice. Like you're lit up from the caffeine, and then you're kind of in flow state from the ketones. And if you look at the actual mechanisms, it makes a lot of sense. It's like you're creating an energy demand, and then you're supplying that energy demand with a really clean source of fuel. And I would extend that out. So not just caffeine. I would say anything psychoactive And you or listeners can fill in the blank of like what that means. But like any kind of psychoactive compounds that you're taking, if you're doing doctor assisted, of course, if you're doing doctor assisted ketamine or psilocybin treatment or anything else like that, or even if you're chewing like nicotine gum, like anything psychoactive that it's increasing, you're taking it to like increase an aspect of brain activity, which is creating an increase in brain energy demand. And where's that energy coming from? And so I like to think of ketones as it's infinitely stackable with like whatever your favorite nootropic or anything is, because ketones I don't consider them a nootropic. Like they are a substrate. They are an energy substrate that has calories in it. And it's a very efficient form of, it's like when you go to the gas station, it's like gas all the way on the right. It's like the very efficient.
It's the super high premium.
Yeah. And it's like whatever car you're driving, like whatever nootropic you're taking, whatever it is that you're going for, that's creating an energy demand. Ketones, again, they're the energy. They're not, it's not a drug the way like caffeine is like a very specific drug that does a specific thing. Drugs tend to be very specific versus substrates are general purpose. It's like wherever your body has that energy demand, it's going to be pulling the available energy that it can, and having elevated ambient ketone levels means that that energy demand can be using clean form of fuel.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I'm just curious though too, like do you think that we should only be using this then for like to extend our like kind of fast, or like just for performance, maybe performance or cognitive even performance? You and I are doing a podcast. We got to be on, like
right.
Having it for that. I mean, and then what I'm saying is like, what would those be like probably the best times to use it? Or what if I also like, I'm having my dinner tonight and I'm having like, we had, some chicken and some rice. Like, would you also just like sip it then, like with a meal, or would it kind of, I mean, is it a waste in that sense, I guess?
I like it the most. I see a lot of people using it the most in our community, and like more front loaded earlier into the day. It's like you wake up and you have glass of water, black coffee, maybe your bulletproof coffee or MCT coffee. You're not touching anything with carbs or sugar in it. You have a shot of ketones, and you're basically extending your low carb, no carb window or your fasting window. And you're able to extend that to like noon or 2 p.m. And then a lot of people like to not these days, like I think a lot of people aren't having like a bowl of pasta for lunch, at least in our community, in our like
right.
biohack.
What if you did though? Like, what if you did? Would you see some kind of like evening out with the exogenous ketones kind of help maybe a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, you just be like supercharged. Like that's what I would recommend if you're about to go on a big bike ride, is like have carbs and ketones, because then you'll be like it's like a Toyota Prius. Like you have gas and you have electricity. Like you would have both at the same time. It's like generally like the point with ketones is like you're generally running on like that electricity. You're generally going to be really running clean. But if you're really wanting to max out on substrate availability because you're going to go on a bike ride, it's like, okay, have both. And same with recovery. It's like there was this really interesting study done with this Belgian research group where they were doing basically a study that emulated Tour de France training, or Tour de France riding, where it was like they were riding multiple times a day, every day for 3 weeks, like riding really hard. And one of the groups had ketones and one of the groups did not have ketones. And both groups were allowed to eat ad libitum, like as much as they wanted outside from the ketones. And what they found with the ketone group is that they had significantly better recovery. So
interesting.
The ketones themselves are able to, one way to think about it is like, if you do a workout and you have your protein shake, the ketones are like a multiplier on that. They accelerate muscle glycogen reuptake. So your muscles store glycogen as fuel. If you have like a big thing that you do with your protein shake afterwards, you're like giving your body more fuel to go and pack on so you can do it again tomorrow. Ketones accelerate that. They also accelerate muscle protein resynthesis. So just when you're lifting weights, like you're micro tearing your muscles, and then you eat protein, you repair those muscles better than they were before. That's how you bulk. And ketones accelerate that too. So it's like, should I have it with dinner or not? It like depends. Cause like, if you're a really high performance person, I would say, hell yeah, absolutely. Like it's definitely going to help you with recovery. if you're a normal person, it's like ketones have calories in them. And so you might just be having like a lot of calories. Like you might.
That's what I was kind of wondering, if there is a diminishing return, right? Where it's like you're just packing on extra calories. You're not getting any of the extra benefit. But it's interesting to hear you say, like you said, it's a substrate that can really just stack on to a lot of things and just enhance whatever you're already doing, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we see this. One way to think about it is like hydration. Like, what does water help you with? Like, if you have water at 11 a.m., it's going to give you more energy. If you shouldn't be like dehydrated during the day. If you have water, you're going to be more sharp. If it's 11 p.m., you're going to have a hard time falling asleep if you're thirsty.
Right.
Drink some water. It's going to help you go to sleep. So like, does water help you stay awake? Does it help you go to sleep? Like, how can this one thing seemingly help you do both? And it's like, well, water is just the like fundamental. That's like as primitive as it gets. Like, we're made out of water. The planet's made out of water. So you can see the analogy for water of like, okay, well, that's this like universal primitive that we need for everything that we're doing. So it's going to help you with sleep, and it's going to help you with exercise. And ketones are like not far from that as a substrate, where if you have ketones before or during your workday, they're going to be powering your brain as you're jamming on spreadsheets and podcasts. If you have a little bit of ketones before bedtime, they're going to help your body to do its cleanup tasks and turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, right? The rest and recover nervous system, not the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. So whatever your circadian rhythm is at, like whatever your body is trying to go and do, I don't know the better analogy. It's like really good gasoline. Like whatever your body is going to try and do, if you're like riding up a hill or you're in traffic or whatever your car is trying to do, you're burning gas. So like a better gas is going to be better for you.
100%. I'm wondering too, I work with a lot of weight loss clients. Have you seen in just like the weight loss community, or just people trying to lose weight, have they used the ketone IQ, or have you seen any success stories of how people have maybe used it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it's really interesting. So there was a study that was done where they gave participants ketone drinks, and there were two wings. One had ketone drinks, the other had isocaloric, so same amount of calories, like an isosceles triangle, like same amount of calories, but in carbohydrates and dextrose, so sugar. So they had the same amount of calories of ketones in group A. Group B had the same amount of calories of ketones. And then what they showed in the ketone group is that they had significantly lower feelings of hunger. So just when they were asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry are you? People felt significantly less hungry when they had ketones versus sugar. And then when they did the objective blood measure, they looked at ghrelin, hunger hormone, and they saw on that objective measure, they saw a decrease in ghrelin levels. So they suppress the appetite hormone, which is really interesting. And I think that rings true for a lot of people who look seriously at weight loss, where it's like not all calories are the same. Like a Snickers bar is not the same as like 2 hard-boiled eggs, right? Like
what?
Like, yeah, I mean, it's like obvious to you and me, but I think some people go so far down the like calories in, calories out of like, okay, well, I get 2,000 calories today. I'm gonna eat whatever the hell I want, but try and stay under 2,000. And then it's like, well, if half your calories are like milkshakes and frosted flakes and oatmeal and pancakes, like carby stuff, like you're gonna have a really hard time staying under 2,000 versus like, yo, you get to eat. Like, this is why people love the keto diet. And like, I'm not like the full on, I don't do like full hardcore keto diet. I would say I'm very low carb, and I spend a lot of time in ketosis. Even if I didn't drink ketones, I was a very low carb guy. But I'm not dogmatic.
Yeah.
But that this is why people love the keto diet, is because if I say to you like, yo, you can eat as much steak and bacon and eggs and avocados and MCT oil and coconuts, like as much low carb, high fat protein stuff as you want, you would have a hard time eating like overeating on that, because it's so satiating. It sticks to your ribs.
Yeah, you would not be able to. That's for sure.
Versus like a bag of candy. Like, I don't know about you, but what is the first thing you want to do as soon as you're done eating a bag of candy? I need another bag of candy. Like, it just doesn't, like, I don't like, if I have like a few hard-boiled eggs, like I stop being hungry. Like,
right.
The hard-boiled eggs they work. Like they make you stop being hungry. So different calories are different. I think it's the overall point. And ketones in particular, they have this appetite control effect where there's really really efficient form of calories, or 100 calories from ketones is gonna satiate you more than 100 calories from other things. So that's how people are using it. And this has a giant, I don't know, caveat or liner note next to it, which is like ketones do have calories in it. So if you have a donut plus ketones, okay, you just had a donut plus ketones, like that's not the weight loss program, but it's more that if you use it to substitute, or if you use it to extend your intermittent fast, that's where it's powerful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm glad you get that caveat, because I don't want people eating their donuts and then still pouring some Ketone IQ over it.
It's the worst donut ever. Just enjoy your donut.
Yeah. I'm wondering, should anyone is this a product that's would not be for somebody I don't know, someone maybe or would you say, yeah, maybe you want to be more cautious, or just check in with your doctor if they had high triglycerides or just something like that? I mean, would there be anybody that would say, hey, maybe just be careful, or is this pretty good for everybody?
In general, if you have any kind of even medium level of concern with your medical conditions or medical history, you talk to your doctor about anything. Like a massage gun, if you have blood clots, a Theragun can give you a heart attack. So if you have any level of concern, talk to your doctor. In particular, it's okay, if you have diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, where your body is sometimes making too much ketones, where your body basically is not good whatsoever at processing glucose and therefore is always trying to make ketones, that's an instance to check out for sure. I would say what we just said, for weight loss, being cognizant around don't just stack it on top of everything else that you're doing. That's not what's going to work. I would say, yeah, for pregnant women, I think any pregnant women listening definitely already know, just to be really careful. My wife is pregnant. Be careful with everything. You should probably swap out your multivitamin and everything else that you're doing. You want to be really careful about what you're having in that state, just because you're caring for two, and that second person is going to be highly sensitive to anything that you're putting in your body. So yeah, I would say type 1 diabetics, I would say pregnant women, I would say people with any kind of known medical history, for sure. Check with your doctor in general.
Otherwise, yeah, this is pretty good stuff. Pretty safe.
Yeah, look, okay. I may be being too bearish on it, where it's this is FDA grass. This is the same level of, it's completely food safe. It's completely in the system.
Yep.
We sell it on Amazon and Sprouts and stuff. This is not crazy Russian.
And just remember, people that are listening to this, they're biohackers, man. So they get it. The people that are listening to this podcast they're into that stuff. I was just curious. I want to kind of wrap things up, but I was wondering, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
I think this has been a really good ground to cover. I mean, there's a lot else. I would flip it back to you. What I know your audience is interested in a lot else besides ketones. I am too. I'm a big runner. I do a lot of barefoot running. I do my deadlifts barefoot. I did, I got a lot of ideas about a lot of wearables and hardware. And, my baby daughter, we just did a stem cell preservation of her umbilical cord. I do a lot of other stuff around in biohacking. So yeah, if there's any other just broad questions, happy to talk there, or we can leave it at
I'm going to actually ask
yeah.
you, I'm going to ask you some more questions in the lightning round. So we'll talk about that.
Oh, sick.
But yeah. Okay. Awesome. Let's jump into the lightning round then, and we'll wrap things up. Cool.
Love lightning rounds.
I'm curious, Michael, what are some choices you think that you made that made you who you are today?
That's a big one. I would say the decision to smile anyway in life, whatever happens. There's a lot of things there's some things in life that are just actually very bad, and there's some things in life that are very obviously good. There's a lot of stuff that's on the margin that you can just be really happy about. I don't know, you can be really happy about your lunch from Chipotle. You can be really happy about your morning cup of coffee. You can be really happy about just little things. I don't know, if you bought yourself the nice, your favorite headphones, enjoy them. Even 2 years after you bought them, every time you put them on, you can choose to smile anyway. And this sounds kind of floaty out there, but I think it does, Matt. I think happiness is it attracts other people. I think people want to work with and for good vibes
Yep.
people, and then it all comes back around. And if you can figure out the secret to how to be happy in life, it's like having the one ring, right? It's like having the Lord of the Rings ring, but like better. It's like you will see like people way wealthier than you, or people way more successful, or way this or that. Like they'll be drawn to you, and you will get all those other things. You will get the wealth, you will get the success. Like if you've cracked the code on just how to be like happy as like a man or a woman, as a one of one person, everything else in life I found will come in abundance.
Yeah. I love that, man. That's amazing. I'm curious, like you guys are doing such amazing work in the health and wellness world. Like who inspires you?
I'm really inspired by in the health and wellness space. I think Dave Asprey's cool, a really cool guy. I think he really does earn the title of like godfather, grandfather of biohacking, where he did a lot of this stuff, right? He put bulletproof coffee on the map. He really brought it out of the like weird basement into the like slightly less weird, like still not like still wasn't totally mainstream, but he really brought it out there and was like, hey, you look, like doctors are cool, but they don't have all of the answers, especially when you're going once a year and getting like a 15-minute check-in and like a popsicle stick in your mouth and like, okay, good, like, okay, no heart attacks. Okay, cool. See you next year. Like
Yeah.
that the idea of constantly, quantified self and self experimentation and tracking different biomarkers. I think he put a lot of the fundamentals on the map. So he's always been really inspiring. I'm really inspired at large by people who just like, I don't know, like set the culture, like make things cool. Like one of my favorite books is Shoe Dogs, Nike. That's a great one just for any entrepreneur, any just curious person. Like it was not inevitable that Nike would happen, and they went through hell to make it happen. Like now they're just, my whole life they've been like a dominant global brand, Air Jordans, whatever, like the coolest brand. But then like the vision to go that he had and the doggedness to make it happen, and to be not just this like technical, oh, our foam is like works technically better, but like they were really serious about culture and being a culture company, and like taking the technology but putting it in the culture. Like how do they interact with Olympic athletes? How do they interact with urban street culture? Like how do they actually take their insight and bring it into the culture? I feel like a lot of tech people that have good tech insights, they don't make the connection, because you got to be left brain and right brain. I think a lot of people are like pick one, and I was really inspired by the way that Shoe Dogs, Phil Knight did his thing.
That's amazing. I got to check that book out. And by the way, I was going to ask you, like, if that was going to be my next question, of like are there any like top books that stood out for you that you'd recommend people read that had like a huge impact on your life? If there's like a top 1 to 3 or something.
Yeah, I have a couple other books I like. One book I've been really liking the last few years, keep turning back to, is The Speed of Trust. It's a good just business book in general. And the basic thesis of the book is that trust accelerates everything across your life, across your organization, at work. That if people trust each other, on a level of competency, on a level of integrity, like if you know that if you mean what you say what you mean, and then so does everyone else that you're around. It's like the dots, like if your organization is a bunch of like dots with lines between them, like the lines are just they're like drawn with a Sharpie instead of like a shaky pencil. It's like, you know what you're going to get from everyone around you. And that trust, it takes time. It takes a lot of character, takes a lot of vulnerability, takes a lot of apologizing when you're wrong, takes a lot of just like ownership. As Jocko would say, extreme ownership, like owning your own outcomes, owning what you do and say. And I think it's a good way to think about things, even when you're in like a aggressive, fast-paced work culture. This idea of trust, which can seem a little like soft and gentle. It's like, well, that's actually how like the best, fastest organizations move. It's just like very snappy, high trust between like Jeff Bezos and his execs, or Steve Jobs and his execs.
Yeah, well, I love that. Okay, I haven't heard about that book, so I'm excited. I got a new one.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Any rituals or hacks or practices that you do on a regular basis?
I think it's good to do some sort of plant-based medicines on a like semi-regular basis, like to defragment the old hard drive, like to reset the coconut. It's really interesting having this baby daughter who's she's now like 3 to 4 months old, and she has no she has no constructs, right? She doesn't know any kind of bias or any kind of symbols. It's all she's just seeing she's seeing reality very raw. It's like when you're, if people know photography, it's like when you're shooting in raw, like she hasn't she's not applying any layer of like opinions and perceptions on top of it. She's just seeing it very raw. I think it's helpful to like get back into that state, whether that's with plant-based rituals or breath work or a silent meditation or an intermittent fast, like something to reset the coconut every quarter or so, and then re-enter the world of constructs and like be mindful about what's serving you or not. Like, is the way that you are conceiving of X person that you work with, is that like correct? And is it serving you? Like, how do you even think about yourself? How do you think about the people in your life? Like, what are the constructs that you have, the mental models that you have for the way that the world around you works, and like peel them away, and then be mindful about which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to leave left away. And look, some mental models are amazing, right? Like Warren Buffett or something, like Michael Jordan had amazing mental models for like the game that they've chosen to play. They have absolute winner mindset. They've absolutely figured out the right mental models. But the whole point of what I'm saying is like, it's helpful to like strip away your mental models and then be mindful about which ones you want to like sharpen to include, and like leave the other ones, whatever, in the ether.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of amazing people I've interviewed have credited plant medicine too. So it's really cool to hear, you mentioned the same thing. Last but not least, brother, where can people find you and the good folks at H.V.M.N?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm at BDM_runner. I'm really active out there. Say hello, hit me up. Would love to hear what you're doing. The company is called Health via Modern Nutrition. It's H.V.M.N. You can find us on Google and Amazon and all sorts of good places. We're also on every social media platform, and we'd love to hear from people what you're trying out, what your protocol, what are you training for? Drop us a line. Yeah, we'd love to hear from people.
Michael Brandt, thanks for being on the show, brother. Appreciate you.
Joel, thanks for having me.